So today I just want to run you through this really simple little design here. It's literally 4 stitches, 4 row repeat. It's that simple. Just for anybody who is still a little scared to try overlay mosaic crochet. This just uses 2 stitches and chains. So chains, double crochets into the back loop, trebles into the front loop, 2 rows down. That is all you need to know to create this lovely little swatch here. And you can see how you've got different textures, or like a totally different design when you actually add the contrast. It's all still exactly the same stitch and row repeats, but they look so different when you haven't got the contrast. Okay, so when we start, I always recommend you start with a length of chains rather than sort of the chainless foundation methods. The reason for that being that with overlay mosaic crochet, you just working 1 row in each colour. You don't turn, you're always working from the right side, so you have lots of ends. There'll be like a loose end at each end of every row. And to avoid having to weave all of those in, I generally recommend that you add an envelope border at the end. So the border will be effectively 2 borders which sandwich those loose ends between them. And to make it easy to start that, we will be adding a chain at each end of the row, sort of between an edge stitch and the actual pattern. So, and we need that on every row, including the very bottom and the very tops. So when I start my chain, I just twist the yarn around like so, pull a loop through. I'm not going to pull that tight. That's just going to effectively become like a bonus chain. We're going to leave that loose until we're absolutely certain that we're not going to need it when we get to our pattern rows. When you're doing something narrow like this little swatch, that's unlikely, but obviously if you're doing something big, you may miscount, you might just need it. So we'll just leave that loose. And then we're going to need a multiple of 4 plus 5 chains. So you'll just get any multiple of 4 you want. I'm just going to do 3 multiples of 4, just a little narrow swatch. So that's 12 stitches, and then you add 5 on. And that 5 is what I'll call a balancing stitch. So our little pattern, that'll be mirrored at each end. So that like balances out the pattern. Then you've got the chain at each end I mentioned before, and also the edge stitch I think I mentioned before as well. So you've got them at each end. So that's your extra 5. Okay, so I'm now going to do 12 chains. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's my 3 multiples of 4. And then add on 5 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then I'm actually going to add a turning chain as well. Okay, so that's how I'm starting my there. Now, if you'll notice, I didn't pull those chains too tight. If you tend to chain really tightly, it could be a good idea just to use a slightly larger hook just for this chain, because you're now going to need to be, you're basically going to be using all 3 loops of your chain if you add a border at the end. So I'll explain how. So these 2 loops at the front of the chain there, they are going to be used in our border. One for the front border and one for the back border. So when we're actually getting started on our piece, we need to twist the chain round. And can you see you've also got this 3rd loop at the back there, also often referred to as the back bump. Okay, so that's what we're going to be working our first row into. So not this very first one, because that's our turning chain. Now I'm going to work into that bump there. So that is our first edge stitch. So then we work a chain, which again, try not to pull it too tight. You don't want it really loose, but you want it so it's not too tight, because you're going to need to be able to get your hook into each side of that when we make the border. Okay, then we're going to skip this chain underneath, and then the first stitch of our actual pattern, which is what is that balancing stitch I mentioned, goes in there. So we're just now going to work our however many multiples of 4 stitches just into those back bumps. Okay, So I'm now going to have 12 more after my initial balancing stitch. Okay, so I now have another 12 double crochets after my balancing stitch. So there should be, we'll just double check, 13 stitches now after this initial chain. Okay, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. Okay, so that's just say, you know, however many multiples of 4. Now, a little question, a little point about the multiples. Most of my patterns, my Mosaic Crochet patterns, are designed to work with, well, all the repeats will fit into a multiple of 48 stitches plus the 5. Okay, so if you wanted to mix this pattern in with any of my other designs, I'd recommend you actually start with a multiple of 48 plus 5 stitches. But for this actual pattern, all you need is 4, multiple of 4 plus 5. Okay, so now to end the row, and we'll end every row the same, we do another chain and then our edge stitch. Okay, and then fasten off. So to fasten off, I'm just going to pull that through. Again, make sure you leave enough of an end to be able to tie it off, to secure it, to do the border. Okay, I'm probably tying up my initial loop there, but because I know I've got the right number, but I'll just leave it for now and explain what I mean about the pattern. Okay, so that is our sort of foundation row, our row 1 done. Now, if I was actually making a larger project, what I would normally do is, like I say, do a foundation row. So you have like an extra row in the same colour at the beginning. So this would be my foundation row. I would now do another row in the same colour of back loop double crochets. But I'm just going to go straight to the next colour for the purpose of this little pattern. Okay, so nice strong contrast I've got here. The stronger the contrast, the easier you will see the pattern. Now, there's also, I'm also going to run you through texture on this in a little while as well, but for the purpose of beginning, we're just going to be interested in the pattern. Okay, so now I'm going to start with a slip knot on my hook. Well, my version of a slip knot. When I do a slip knot, I do, like I said at the beginning of that chain, twist the yarn around, pull the chain through, and then I do pull it tight. So that's probably not an actual slip knot, but it works the same way. Okay, so however you get your knot on your hook, do that. And then we start with a standing double crochet under both loops in this edge stitch. Okay, so the edge stitches, we always work under both loops. Double crochet, then a chain, and we're always going to skip this chain underneath the edge chains. Okay, and now it's nice and simple. We're just going to do a row of double crochets, but we're only going to work into that back loop. Okay, because we're going to need these front loops when we make the pattern in a little while. Okay, so literally just into the back loop. And we're going to work a row all the way across like so. Okay, right up until you get to that other chain at the other end. There we go, one more stitch to go. Chain, skip that edge chain, and then again, just for this edge stitches, we're working under both loops, double crochet there. That just keeps those edge stitches a little firmer. Okay, fasten off. So that is now row 2 done. Okay, so for row 3, we're actually going to start making our pattern. So far, and this is just a simple, really. We're just going to be adding some trebles in now. So again, I'm going to start with a slip knot, and again we're going to start, you see, with our first double crochet edge stitch under both loops, chain, skip a chain. Okay, so now what we're going to do is start straight away. So our balancing stitch on this row 3 is a front loop treble. So we're not going to be working that into this front loop. We're going to drop it down to the row below. Okay, and work into that front loop. Okay, then we've got 3 back loop double crochets. So just as we did on the previous row, you're only working into the back loops there, and then front loop treble again. So when you work a front loop treble, make sure you don't then work your back loop double crochet directly behind it. Can you see we've got one left there, got one left there. So it's just 1 stitch in each one. Although if you added an extra one there, then you'd be increasing your stitches. Okay, so that is our repeat. 1, 2, 3 back loop double crochets, 1 front loop treble. Okay, and I've only got 1 more in my little swatch. 2, 3, 1 front loop treble, and then we end with a chain, skip that chain, and an edge stitch. So I say I won't keep running through the ends with you every row. But that is it. That is basically how you do overlay mosaic crochet. So all of these complicate. I mean, you can add some other colors in as well with when doing tapestry and things as well, but basic overlay mosaic crochet is that simple. Okay, so most of my designs I've only got a tiny bit of tapestry in my Letitia's garden at the moment. Other than that, all of my designs only basically use overlay mosaic crochet. Okay, so now we know that's right, because we've ended where we should do with that treble. We can now tighten up our initial chain. So okay, so for row 4 we switch colours again. Oh, a little tip: if you find that you're getting like loops showing there, 2 little things I would recommend. Firstly, you need to make sure you keep the top loops of your stitches nice and even and not too big. Okay, we're just going to tension that very first part of our stitch just a little bit more if that's happening. And the next thing you do is make sure the rest of your stitch isn't too tight, so then you're not pulling it up. If you can do that, you should get lovely neat stitches. Okay, so row 4. Slip knot, edge stitch under both loops, chain, skip the chain. Now we've because our previous row started with a front loop treble, we can't do a treble here. We've got to do a back loop double crochet. It's the only thing you can do when you see a treble. So if you happen to be following a pattern and it appears to be telling you to do a treble over a treble, you've probably miscounted somewhere. I mean, there may be a mistake in the pattern, but more than likely it's just that you've miscounted. Okay, so we start with a balancing stitch as a back loop double crochet, and for this row we're literally going to just be repeating 2 stitches. So 1 front loop treble, 1 back loop double crochet. I'm going to do that all the way along. So front loop under there, back loop double crochet all the way along, front, back. Okay, so my yarns all got caught up. I'll finish that off in a second. Okay, so that's row 4 done, and then the final row of this pattern, row 5, you're back to our original colour again. So slip knot, edge stitch under both loops, chain, and then for this one our balancing stitch is a back loop double crochet, and then our repeat is another back loop double crochet, 1 front loop treble, whoops, 2 back loop doubles. Okay, so that's our first repeat. Then our next one starts with back loop double crochet, front loop treble, 2 back loop doubles. So this one, obviously we've now got a run of 3 back loop double crochets between our trebles. So that is our little repeat. Okay, so here I have done it with a nice strong contrast. Let me just finish this off. But this little pattern actually also creates a really lovely texture. So if you don't want to change colours, if you want it all in one colour, you can, or if just a tiny bit of contrast, it won't matter. This will show up nicely. Now, the best ones for showing up the texture, best designs, are if you've got some horizontal lines. Because where you've got horizontal lines, they then effectively in one colour become a background, and then the vertical lines become the textured pattern. So row 1 was just for the initial, like, setting it up. So we're now going to be repeating rows 2 to 5. Okay, so that's our 4-row repeat, and I'm now going to do the next repeat in the same colour here. So we're not going to change colours, okay? So for that, row 2, we start, it's actually a nice simple one. If you remember, row 2 was just a row of back loop double crochets. So I will now go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back and we'll do row 3 together. Okay, so I've now just got started on row 3 with my edge stitch and the edge chain. Remember, this one then started with a front loop treble. Okay, so I'm going to do that into there, then 3 back loop double crochets, 2, 3, and 1 front loop treble. So I hope you can see the texture there. 2, 3, and 1 front loop treble. Just finish that off. 3, 1 front loop treble, edge chain, edge stitch, and fasten off. Okay, so let's see, hopefully you can see the texture of the stitches there. So if we now do row 4, edge stitch, chain, and remember this one we had our balancing stitch as a back loop double crochet, and now we're just repeating 1 front loop treble, 1 back loop double crochet, repeating that all the way across. Do a couple more and then hopefully you'll see how the pattern's going. Okay, so there we are. See the little texture developing there. So I'll carry on and complete this little repeat. Do the next row 2. Okay, so there we are. Hopefully you can now see by doing it in one colour, we've got the texture, and it's a different pattern. It's that little zigzag pattern rather than the sort of castellations. Okay, so I've now just done rows 2, 3, and 4 again, exactly the same as we did down here. But for row 5, rather than using this pale hint of lilac colour, I'm going to actually switch colours. So we could now do, if you now wanted to do another strip in a single colour, but change that colour. This is the nice way of doing it sort of smoothly. So just show you what I mean. So edge stitch, oh, slip knot, edge stitch, chain, and remember row 5 is back loop double crochet, balancing stitch, then another one front loop treble, 2 back loop doubles. Now don't worry that you can see a little bit of that lighter colour there, because once it's all done you'll hardly notice that. You could, if you want, have done like a tapestry crochet where you switch the colours, so you use the same colour there, but I don't think that's necessary. show you what I mean when we've done it. So say there's row 5 like so. So we've now switched our sort of main colour that we're doing for this design from the hint of lilac to this, I can't remember what it's called, what is that called? Cinder Rose. Okay. So that's that. Oh, get in there, edge stitch. Okay. So what we'll now do, I'll now just run through another repeat of rows 2 to 5, and hopefully you'll then be able, and I'll come back and just show you that, and you'll see what I mean about how, well, hopefully you can see there. Quite a nice way of changing colour. Okay, so there we go. It's my little swatch completed. So you can see when you just use the one colour, you get this lovely zigzag sort of textured pattern. And if you add a nice strong contrast, you're going to get the sort of castellations.